Hello, my dear students and the rest of the learners. Welcome to part 26 of a 41-part series of tutorials in Fundamentals of Object-Oriented Programming in Java. In this tutorial, we are going to be looking at how to create and use user-defined methods. My name is MemGM, or you can simply call me MNSwap. User methods are the methods that a programmer defines within his or her source code for use for various purposes. The programmer creates them and invokes them whenever needed. A method is therefore a block of code that performs a specific task, just as we discussed in part 24 and part 25 of the series. The main advantage of making use of a method is what we call code reusability, meaning that you can be able to use a section of code more than once without the need to retype it each and every time you need it. We can write a method once and use it multiple times. For this reason, we do not have to rewrite the entire code each time. Think of it as write once, reuse multiple times. Dividing a complex problem into smaller chunks makes your program easy to understand and reuse. Therefore, the syntax for declaring a method is as follows. You have the return type for your method, followed by the name of that method and the parentheses. And then you define the body of the method. In other words, you outline or you write the code for each instruction that is meant to perform a certain task within that method. And you close the definition. My dear students and the rest of the learners, it is important to note that the structure of a method is almost similar to the structure of the main method within Java. This is because programs contain the return type, and therefore methods also contain the return type. The programs contain the header, and the method contains an header. We have the body, so we have the header and the body of a method, whereby the return type specifies the type of value a method returns. For example, if a method has an integer return type, then it returns a value of type integer. If the method does not return a value, its return type is void. Now, when we speak about returning, what do we mean? A return, or to return a value, simply means that when we invoke a call statement for executing a certain method, of course, that method will generate some data. And therefore, if that data will be required by another method within your program, you have to return the results of that method or of the computation back to the main method. And the main method is void static main. So once the value has been returned back to the main method, then any other variable or any other method can receive it as a parameter. And we are saying if the work of a method is not to return any value, but it's to perform a certain task or perform specific tasks and finalize without the need to return any value to the caller, then you don't need to have a data type for the return. What you write there is the reserved word void. So the method name is an identifier that is used to refer to the particular method in a program. The method body includes the programming statements that are used to perform some tasks. The method body is enclosed inside the curly braces. On the same note, modifier defines access types, whether the method is public, private, and so on. Static simply means that if you use this word, if you use the keyword static, it can be accessed without creating objects. Or that method will be used without, or will be accessible without the need to pass through objects. For example, the square root method of standard month class is static. Hence, we can directly call month.square root, or we can directly call the square root method from the file month without creating an instance of the month class. However, the reserved one static can be left out depending on the method being created. So parameter 1 and parameter 2 here are simply the values that are passed to a method. We can pass any number of arguments to a method. How do you pass? You pass them through a call statement, as we are going to see in this presentation. The following is therefore an example of a definition for a method for adding two numbers. So the name of our method, as we are going to see, is supposed to speak something to the user. When you read the name of a method, you should be able to tell what that method is doing. So here, we are first of all declaring two variables. We are declaring two variables called num1 and num2, whose scope is protected, and the content in them will be of type integer. And then from there, we create the method as follows. The name for our method is addNumbers. Now, as you can see, it begins with the reserved one void. So void addNumbers followed by the parentheses. This simply means that this method called addNumbers will not be returning any value back to the caller or back to the main function or back to the main method. Its work will simply be to add the numbers, display the results, and that will be the end, as you can see. So within the method, we can declare some local variables. Local variables are simply memory locations within a method. The variable locations that are declared within a method or set aside within a method to be used only or solely by the method itself and not accessible to other methods. So we call them local variables. So in this case, for our definition for the method called addNumbers, we are declaring a local variable called result, or a memory location. We are setting aside a memory location called result that is going to hold the value of type integer or a whole number. Then we can create an object for reading our input using the scanner. So we declare the object called input, which is of type scanner. So as you can see, my dear students and the rest of the learners, just as we declare the input object within the main method, if you are going to use the input functions or input methods or methods for reading values within your method, it is important for you to remember to declare the object. Then we can code the statements for reading our numbers. So we are going to display the text on our screen, enter the first number, and then we read our first number using the method called nextInt. NextInt. So the value that you type is supposed to be of type integer. It will be read by the function or by the method called nextInt through the object input, and the value received will be stored in the memory location called num1. Then we request the user to enter the scored number, and the value entered or the value typed will be read by the method called nextInteger. It will be read through the object input, and it will be stored in the memory location called num2. From there, we request the compiler or the processor to pick the content in the memory location called num2 and to the content in the memory location called num1, and the results that will be gotten be stored or assigned in the memory location called result. From there, we are going to display our results and our numbers using the statement, the sum of the content stored in memory location called num1, and then 2, the content in the memory location called num2, and the result is the value stored in memory location called result. And therefore, if, for example, you have entered num1 being 5, and num2 you have entered 10, then this statement will simply be, or what it will do, it will pick 5 and into 10, get value 15, then store 15 in the memory location called result. From there, this statement will read as follows on the screen. The sum of 5 and 10 is 15. 15 is the result, is the value stored in the memory location called result. And that will be the end of that method. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, a method, as you can see, a method is a self-contained portion of a program. It contains the return type, it contains the header, it contains internal declarations, or what we call declaration of local variables, and it contains the rest of the statements that we find in ordinary programs. So you can have a method that is performing several activities, even though that's not a good programming practice. And good programming practice is to ensure that you have a method performing only a single activity. For example, only prompting the user to enter values. Then the issue of computing should be performed by a different method. And then displaying the results should be done by a different method. So this method that is called add numbers can be broken down further into 3 methods. The method for inputting values, the method for computing the sum, and the method for displaying the results. So you have coded a method. How do you invoke it? Remember, you have always to call a method from your main method in a Java code or in a Java program so that the compiler can be able, or the processor can be able to perform the instructions within that method. So you have to call a method. So how do you call methods in Java? How can you call the add method? How can you call this add method in Java so that it is able to perform these activities? So to call a method in Java, you write the method's name followed by 2 parentheses and a semicolon. For example, if you, for example, you wanted to call the add numbers, it will simply be add numbers. It will simply be add numbers followed by the parentheses and a semicolon. The compiler cannot execute a set of instructions in a method unless it is invoked by calling it from the main function. So if you have broken down your program into several methods, what you're supposed to have within the main method is only the call statements for the methods. You don't need to retype the code afresh. Therefore, once you have defined a method, you can invoke it by calling it using the following syntax. So the syntax for calling a method, just as I've said, is you begin with the name or the object name, followed by the method name. For example, if you have an object, you have created an object called num_object, then you can invoke the add numbers method using the statement num_object or num_object dot add numbers. If it is not passing any parameters, as you can see, there is nothing we have any closed within the parameter or within the parentheses for the add numbers method. But if you have to pass some parameters or some values to the function being called or the method being called, we would then close some values within the parentheses. So this is another example of how we can invoke a method but now by passing parameters into it. So the syntax is object name dot method name, and then we enclose the parameter list within the parentheses. For example, if you want to pass two values, num1 and num2, to a method called add numbers, which is accessible through the object called numbers object, you write it as numbers object dot add numbers, then you enclose num1, comma, num2 within the parentheses and a semicolon. If it's passing parameters, method. The following is therefore a sample program for adding two numbers that does not make use of parameters or return any value to the main method. So the comment for our program is program for adding two numbers. Then we have the name of our package. Remember, this name of the package is the name of the project. So we have package and numbers. My dear students and the rest of the learners, remember, anytime you see this line within my code, it simply guides you during the process of writing a program. It tells you that when you are giving your project a name, give it the name similar to the name following the package. So package and numbers. Then we have the statement import Java, import java.atil.scanner. The name of our public class is add numbers. And remember, when you save your program, the name of the class will be similar to the name of the file or the source file. So public class add numbers. So what is add numbers going to do? At the rate, we are declaring two variables, which are num1 and num2. The content is of type integer. Then we create a method. So at the rate, we create a method. Remember, a class is self-contained. It contains the variables and the methods. The methods to manipulate the variables within it. So we have methods and we have what we call members. So we have data members, like in this case, for our method, for our class called add numbers, we have data members who are num1, num2, and we have method, which is add numbers and is of type void. And then we define the method called add numbers as follows. So we declare a memory location or a local variable called result of type integer. Then we create an object for reading input, which in this case, we are calling it input of type scanner. And then we can bring the numbers. So we prompt the user to enter the first number. So the text, enter the first number, will be displayed on the screen, and the cursor will blink below that statement, waiting for entry. And then the user types a value. That value is supposed to be of type integer. And therefore, the method for reading values which are of type integer, which is next int, will read that value through the object called input, and the value be stored or assigned in memory location called num1. From there, the statement enter the second number will be displayed on the screen, and the cursor will move on to the next line, waiting to read the value. The user types the value, and it is read by the method called nextInt through the object called input. And the value that is received is stored in the memory location called num2. From there, we request the compiler or we request the processor to pick the value stored in memory location called num1 and to the value in the memory location called num2, and the results that will be gotten be assigned or stored in the memory location called results. From there, we display the statement. The sum of, we read the content in memory location called num1, so the content of memory location called num1 will be displayed at that point, followed by the ones, and the compiler will pick the content in memory location called num2. That value will be displayed at that point, followed by the text is the compiler or the processor will then proceed and read the content in memory location called results and display that value here. So if, for example, we have entered our value for num1 being 20, for num2 being 15, then the statement will read as follows. The sum of 20 and 15 is 35. Where is that 5 coming from? It is from this statement for computing the result, which is pick the content in memory location called num1, 15, and the content called num2, 20. So the result will be 35. And therefore, this statement will read as the sum of 15 and 20 is 35. And that marks the end of that method. From there, we go to the main method. So the main method is public static void main. So that's normal syntax for it. And then its definition will be to create an object of add numbers, or an object that will be used to manipulate. An object that will be used to manipulate the method that we have called add numbers. The method for adding numbers. So how do we declare an object? It is simply add numbers object. That's the name of our object. And it is of type, or it is to manipulate the data for the method called add numbers. So add numbers object is of type add numbers, meaning this is an object that will be used to manipulate the contents of the method called add numbers. From there, we can invoke our method. We can invoke a method called add numbers through the object add numbers object. How do we invoke it? We invoke add numbers method by writing the statement as the object name dot the method name. For example, add numbers object dot add numbers. And that is all. That's how the main method will look like. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, what is important for you to note is that once you have defined your methods outside of the main method, what you only need to include within your main method are the statements for invoking those methods that you have. And remember, you invoke them through their object. So you create the object first. You relate that object to that class or that method. And then from there, you invoke a method through that object. So in the main method, and a public static void main, what we only need to do is to code each of the core statements in the order in which we would like the methods to be executed. And remember, just as I've said in the previous presentations in this series, if a method is supposed to generate values that will be used by the subsequent method, that method must first be invoked first. So it must be called first because it will produce certain data that will be needed by other methods. And then from there, you proceed to the calling or invoking the next method. So what is a Java return type? What is a return type in Java for methods? A Java method may or may not return a value to the function call. We use the return statement to return any value. For example, if you have a method called add numbers that is going to generate a value which is supposed to be passed over to another method, and that value is of type integer, then we write our statement as int add numbers followed by parentheses and the definition for that method. And then the very last statement should be the statement for returning the value to the caller. For example, the value result. So if within this body, you have a variable called result that is holding a certain value, then you return that value. You return the value within or stored within that memory location. So when we say return result, it simply means that result is a local variable within this method called add numbers. So the value there is one which is being returned back to the caller as of type integer. So the return value, the value which is being returned, must be of the specified type of the return statement. So it is important to note that a method is called if a method that is being called is expected to return a value, then you need to include the returned value. Therefore, if the called method is expected to return some result to the caller, the returned value can be assigned to a variable using a statement such as object name dot method name assigned to a variable. So we repeat, or I repeat, if a method is supposed to produce a certain value, for example, if it's performing a computation and it's returning a value or sum, then that sum is supposed to be used somewhere else by another method. It is important then to include a call statement within your main method that will also give opportunity to the processor to assign the result gotten from the method to a variable. And for that reason, if a method is going to return a value, let that value be stored in a certain variable within the main method. So this statement here simply means that the method called method name, which is being executed through the object called object name, is supposed to return a value, and that value is supposed to be assigned in the variable. So for example, if the method called add numbers is going to return a value, for example, of type integer, or the result as type integer, then that value is supposed to be assigned to the memory location called the sum, and this is how we write it. So what the statement is telling the compiler is go to a function, go to a method called add numbers through the object called numbers object. Then perform the activities there and return a value. When you bring that value back to the main method, assign that value that has been returned to the memory location called sum. Once that has been done, you can easily now pass the memory location called sum to any other method by including it within the call statement as an argument. So the returned value must be of the expected data type. This can be demonstrated through the following program, which uses a method to compute the sum of two numbers and returns a value to the main, which is then assigned to a variable called the sum and displayed on the screen. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, this is simply an example. This is an example of a program indicating how a method returns a value and how that value can be assigned to a variable within the main. So the comment for my program is program using a method to compute the sum and return the result. Then we have the name of our project or package as add numbers. Then we have import java.atil.scanner. And the name of our class is add numbers. So it is of type public. So public class add numbers. Then we define our class as follows. We declare two data members who are num1 and num2, whose content is supposed to be of type integer, and it is private. Then we create a method within our class, and the method is add numbers. Now this add numbers method is expected to return a value of type integer back to the caller, who is the main method. And then under its definition, we are declaring a local variable by the name result, which is supposed to hold the value of type integer. Then we can create an object for allowing us to read the value that is going to be entered by the user. and this object is input, so of type scanner. From there, we read our numbers. So we display the statement, enter the first number on the screen, and the cursor is going to be taken to the next line. Then we read the value. So the user types a value. It is read by the method called nextInt through the object called input, and the value which is typed is assigned or stored in the memory location called num1. From there, we prompt the user for the second number, and within that value, which the user will type through the method called nextInt under the object called input. So the value which will be typed, which will be received, will be assigned or stored in the memory location called num2. And then from there, we request the compiler to take the content in memory location called num2, add it to the value, or add it to the content in the memory location called num1, and the overall results, assign them into the memory location called result. Now, we have a variable called result, which in real sense is a local variable to our main method. So for us to have that value being accessible by the main method and by other methods within our program, what we need to do is to return that value that has been generated back to the caller or back to the main method. And how do we do it? We have the reserved one return followed by the name of the variable that contains the value that we want to return. Kindly note that value or the type, the data type of that variable that we want to return must match with the type specified for that method. So like this method is supposed to return a value of type integer, and therefore the variable which contains the value to be returned, the result, must also be of the same type. So let's see how our main method will look like. So under the main method, which is public static void main, you can see we are declaring a local variable called sum. And the content for this sum is supposed to be a whole number. So sum is of type integer. Then we create an object for add numbers class, or an object for manipulating the class that is called add numbers. So how do we create that object? So the type of our object is add numbers. The name of the object is add numbers object. So it is new. It's a new object of the class add numbers. So that's how we write that statement. From there, we can be able now to use the object to manipulate our main or our method as follows. Like we can invoke add numbers method through the object called add numbers object. So how do you tell the compiler to go to the method and perform the tasks as defined in the method? What you do is you have the name of the object for manipulating that method or that class, and then you have dot, the name of the method. For example, add numbers object dot add numbers. It invokes add numbers method. So the add numbers method is being invoked through the object called add numbers. And when the compiler encounters this statement, it will go to the method, perform the tasks there. Remember, it will go to the class, then go to the method, perform all the tasks there, and then return the value result. So this value will be brought and it will be assigned in memory location called sum. And therefore, when we write the statement or we display the statement, the sum of the value for num1 and value in num2 is, what will happen is that the compiler will simply read the value which has been returned and stored in the memory location called sum. So it will simply read the value in the memory location called sum and display it on the screen. Now, as you can see, we have num1 and num2 being accessible from here. Why is it being accessible? Why is num1 and num2 accessible? Because you can see that we have not declared num1 and num2 in our main. Neither have we declared num1 and num2 under the method called add numbers. The reason is simple. It is because this num1 and num2 have been declared with a global scope. And this global scope is the scope of the class called add numbers. So, because the main methods and also add numbers methods are all methods class method, that is why, because we have declared num1, num2 with the scope of the class, it simply means that every member will be able to access it. So the add numbers method, as well as the main method, will all be able to access the content in the memory location called num1 and num2. So if you entered num1 being 15 and num2 being 17, then the statement will read as follows. The sum of 15 and 17 is, the compiler will pick the value in the memory location called the sum. So 15 and 17 is 32. So the statement will read as, the sum of 15 and 17 is 32. And that will be the end of that program. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, it's very important for you to remember this statement, how you invoke a method. How you invoke a method from the main method, and how you return the value, and how the value is assigned and used within the main. And from here, even if you had another method that was to use sum, what would happen is simply to pass sum as a parameter to the methods being invoked. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, let's code this program that I have already explained in our Eclipse IDE. We see how we code, and then we run it to see how it will behave. So this program can be coded as follows. So what you do, you just click on Start button and search for your IDE, which is Eclipse. So this is our Eclipse. If you're using another type, for example, NetBeans Loaded or any other IDE for Java, you wait for it to load. Once it loads, meaning it will be ready for you to proceed and create the project, you proceed. Now, if a program is open, like this one, and always click on close button for it, like that, so that you can code your new program on a clean slate. And how do you proceed? The first thing you do is to create a project. But if in case, for example, you want to have a project that is existing, having additional programs, you just need to right click on that project and create a new class. However, it's always advisable that you create a project for each class or for each you create. I repeat, it's always advisable that you create a project for each program if those programs have no similarity. But if you have more than one program under the same project, then you can use the same project to create more than one class or more than one file. So let's proceed and create a project for our program. So we can click on file, we point on the new, and then we click Java a project. Once you click on Java project, you give your project a name. And note, the name should be meaningful. So I'll call my name and I'll call mine and numbers. But I'll write it this way. And numbers. Remember that the name of this project will be the name of the package. Then from there, you can click on finish. So here is our project and numbers. So we proceed by right-clicking on our project. We point on new, and then we click on class. From the class dialog box, you can see automatically the name of our package has been added. The name of this package is simply the name of the project. From there, you type the name for your class. Give it almost the same name, but begin with uppercase. So, and numbers. And numbers. Remember that the name of this class and numbers will be the same as the name of the file, as you see. Then, because each and every program contains the main method, which is public static void main, you tick or you check this box for public static void main and which method stubs you would like to create. Once you have done that, you click on finish. There we are. You can see the name of our package is add numbers. In fact, this is the name of our project. As you can see from here, it's the name of our project, this one. So from there, the class is add numbers. So what we need to do is we need to add the statement import. We need to add the statement here, import java dot until dot scanner. Then from there, you can indent your program nicely. Then go to the main method. So under the main method, this is where you type your code. Which code do you type here? It is a set of instructions that will be executed by your program, just as we have seen. But please note that for the class, for the object, for the method, the various methods other than the main, those methods are expected to be above or before the main, if the main will use them. So we are going to click here and we create a space here so that we add our method here. So how do we do it? You can type directly here, or if you have already coded your program, you just need to copy and paste it there. So what I'm going to do is to simply paste my code here. So as you can see, I have my data members declared here. They have a global scope, but this scope is the class. And then I have my method here for adding numbers. And then we are defining it as follows. We have the member, who is local member, data member, and we have the set of instructions that this method will perform. So I need to close, I need to ensure that my parentheses are matching. I will also have to indent my code properly for easy debugging and also easy reading. So you can see that I have a return statement and my parentheses are now matching that way. So this is our method. This is our method. And it is returning a value back to the caller. So if you have other classes, you can you have other, if you have other methods, you can define them here. But because I don't have other methods, my program is making use of only a single method, I can remove the space there. So the next thing we have to do is to go now to the main method and add our core statements here and do any other declarations that we want. So you just type your statements. But if you have your program already typed in our processor, you just copy the code and paste it here. So for the sake of saving time, my dear students and the rest of the learners, I'll just paste my code here, which we have already discussed. So you type your code here, or just paste your code here. My dear students and the rest of the learners, I want you to look here carefully. If you look at this code, I have added numbers here and numbers. The question is this add numbers similar to this add numbers? Is the text the same? Is the naming the same? Anything that has some red underline or some big underline tells you that there may be some error. However, if your names are matching and you are sure that they are matching and the data type is okay and the return type is okay, then there is no problem. So ensure that your program or your indentation is proper, and also ensure that the parentheses are matching. So there's parentheses and this one are matching. That is for the main method. Then this one and this one are matching, but you can see we also need another one for the main class. Let's see, this one and this one is okay. This one and this one is okay. This one and this one is okay. So we don't need an extra one. From here, we can save our program. Let's save our program, not save us. Let's save our code. Once you save your code, you can then run the program by clicking on run, and then you click on run. Now, there is something here. You can see there's a small error. We are told that add numbers cannot be resolved to a type. Add numbers cannot be resolved to a type. So what does this mean? It means that there is a small error. There is a small error and or in our naming. So what we need to do is simply rectify our error. So how will we rectify our error? We shall proceed as follows. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, why do we have an error here? We are having an error because this add numbers, the name of the class add numbers is not similar to this name here. You can see here, the name of the class is add numbers. But when you come here, you find it is small letter A. So how do we rectify? So we can rectify that as follows. Always remember that the names must match. Java is case sensitive. And for that reason, you can see the name of our class here is begin with the capital A, uppercase. So, and the object we are declaring here is of type class. And the name of the class is a number. So this name and this name must match. So I have to adjust this letter A, uppercase, as you can see. So the error has been removed. You also do the same here. We have A, because and numbers object is of type class. So this is a new object of the class called add numbers. So from there, you save your program or the changes. Let's run it now and see if the problem has been rectified. You can still see that there is an issue, and the issue is that main has unresolved combination problem. The syntax insert the variable declarations as an issue, the local variable declaration as an issue. So you continue to debug your program until all the errors are removed. So where is the main issue? The main issue here is from where we began by creating the name of the class. So what I'm going to do here is to ensure that the name of the class, the name you give for the class, if it is small, let it be small from the beginning. So that by the time you are reaching here, you have no issue. So let me make a correction to this code. It is important for you, my dear students, to note that the issue of the names of the class does not begin under the code, but it originates from the start. So let's rectify our code. So, my dear students and the rest of the learners, what we are going to do is simply to ensure that this name matches with the name of our class. And therefore, I'm going to remove this letter, make it uppercase that way, and also do the same here. So there we are. We have add numbers, then, so the add numbers is the name of the class, and we are creating an object of that class. So you save your program, and then we can run it now. Good. You can see that our program is now executing successfully. So what is happening is that the compiler or the processor has invoked this method called add number. So when this section or when this code has been reached, this has told the compiler or the processor, go and look for the method called add numbers under the object or for the class which is being controlled or accessed through the object called add number object. So it has gone to this class and found this object, and then the control has been taken to this class and numbers, and this statement has been executed, and then this statement has been executed. This has been done. So this activity will be carried out. Once this bit is executed, the control B or the value will be returned back to here to the main program. So this statement will return the result, and this result will be assigned in sum. So let's enter the first number. We enter a number like 56. We press enter. Then it is asking us to enter the second number. That means we are here, so we enter the value I'll enter 45. Once I press enter, it will compute the sum. This statement will be executed, and the value will be returned back to the main. The value will be stored here. So what we expect to see is the sum of num1 and num2 is this. So let's press enter and see. You can see the value has been, or the compiler has been able to display this statement, which means the sum of what is in num1, that is 56, and what is in num2, 45. So the sum of 56 and 45 is what is in the sum, 101. And that is the end of the program. So my dear students and the rest of the learners, as you have noted, an error is bound to arise if the name you are using here as the name of the class does not match with the name here under the class heading. So ensure that the ones match. A change in a single character may make your program to misbehave. And always remember that the name of the class must be similar to the name. The name of the class must be similar to the name of the file. The name of our file is andnumbers.java, and you can see it is the same. So there must be consistency. Once you are done, you can always close or edit us. You can also exit from the main or from the IDE and go back to your program. And with that, my dear students and the rest of the learners, we have come to the end of part 26 in the series. You can now proceed, listen, watch, and practice part 27 of the series, in which we are going to learn about method parameters. Congratulations, my dear students and the rest of the learners, for learning part 26 or 41 in the series, in which we have learned about how to create and use user-defined methods in fundamentals of object-oriented programming using Java. You can access the rest of the parts in the series, as well as other computer or ICT videos, by clicking or tapping on MLSWAP ICT YouTube channel below this video. To subscribe to the channel, tap on subscribe button below this video on YouTube if it's not currently reading as subscribed. For any further correspondence, kindly write to us through the email emilyswap@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to me. Let's meet in part 27 of the series, and God bless.